Hey, this is Steven from LegitTechTutorials, and today we are on tutorial number 16, I believe, which is static, and we are going to be going over static methods and static variables. So we are going to use the previous program that we wrote to do our static on, and now you notice that here we don't have any variables, no instance variables, and none of this, is of an object. It's not a car, it's not a boat, it's not a train, it's not nothing. It's just doing calculations. So for example, if we go here and we say system.out.println and we say math.square-root and we say 64. Now this is an example of a method that is using static. It has a static identifier. So math is the name of the class, not the name of the object. And then you got square root, and you got 64. Remember, we used to have to do converter program Steven equals new. 1 second, let me computer catch up. So here, this is creating an object. In this case, math.square-root, we didn't need to create an object. So we do not need this anymore. So all you have to do this is give it its static identifier. So here you see static, 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 and static. So originally it was void and nothing else. So this is what it was originally. So it was just like that. So now we're just going to add static void calculate bits to bytes. Now when you go in here, now you no longer need that object, and these work correctly. So you just write converter programs such as this. We used to have to write, Steven here, which would go into the program, and it would have to have an object, which is no good. So here in this case we have the converter program. Now, so if you build this and run it, you'll see everything works here as planned, especially the square root one. So this is math.square-root. So this is the class, and here is the method. So that would work perfectly fine. Now let's say, for example, we wanted to do that in our guessing game. So we go here, actually not a guessing game, let's go into employee. So let's say here we just want to do converter program dot calculate bytes to bits to bytes, and then we'll say like 64 or whatever. Now when we run it, it still works. See, even in a class that we didn't do anything, we just went to a random class that's in that package, and it works correctly. So that is static methods. Now this is a program that uses a lot of that would use static methods because it's not needed. We're not creating an object. We don't even really need a constructor for it. So it's not really that big of a deal. So you could skip out on the constructor and create an object out of it. So now let's go over static variables. Now, static variables are basically where we don't have what we previously had, which was instance variables. So here we'll say we'll say static, and we'll say int static int okay, we'll say number 1, we'll say equals 1. And then when we go system dot so basically what this means is that this one integer is shared. This is called a class integer. So this class integers, there's only one type that's not stored in the class. It has nothing to do with the instance of the object. It's created outside. So if you increment this anywhere, it will change for the rest of them. So for example, then we say number 1 plus plus. So now if we go down here and we create an instance of it, or construct it, so we're going to go Stephen dot equals new. Now when we do that and we run it, it's going to say 1, right? But if we construct it again, see, it says 2 now, even though I'm adding it after. So I'm adding it after, but it still saves. So let's say we do this, and then we say down here or something. We go here to give you more of an idea. And then we move this guy down to the bottom. So now it's outing elsewhere, so this particular static variable is being passed between both programs. And it can be seen through both programs, and it can be modified to both programs. But if I mess with it, in another program, then it will cause a, it will cause a problem. So for example, if I do this here, I created a so I said void increment number 1. I said just that, and then I said number 1 plus plus, and I go out, and I say void get number 1 int return number 1. Oops, sorry, I put void there. You don't want void. You want int get number 1. Okay, so now if I go down here and I get rid of all this, and I say Stephen dot get number 1, say increment number 1, and we say system dot out dot print ln, we say get Stephen dot get, get it out of here, print ln, and we say Stephen dot get number 1 with this. Now when we print it, it's going to do this one. No, we don't need that one anymore. So now it modified it. You could see that, modifying it in one will change it in another one. So if we do this and we say Stephen 1 dot increment number 1, we close it, and we go back to check what is inside the first Stephen. So we increment inside the first inside Stephen number, we'll call it Stephen 2. Stephen 2. So if we increment inside Stephen 2, then it will change it in Stephen number 1. See, now it is changed in Stephen number 1. It used to be right here, which was 2. It used to be 2. Now it's 3 inside. So if you mess with it in somewhere else, it could mess with it in here. So things like that would be bank numbers. So every time you create a bank number, it'll increment the number. So you could have multiple objects that increment the bank number and give you a universal way of sharing that number across multiple platforms and working with that number. So let's say if you didn't want to mess with it, and you say, I don't know if I went over this yet, but like final. So now this will be shared throughout all of your classes, but it would anyways. It would be able to share it without the static. So this is where you would use static, is if you were going to share it across multiple things and be able to modify it and have it universal instead of just one instance variable. And then we went over static methods. So this is why you would use static methods, some sort of computation. So instead of having to put instead of having to create the object with a constructor, you could do just like you saw in math.square-root. Math is a class, square root is a method, and then you put in a parameter. So same thing with this. You do computer converter program dot bits to bytes. And you say 64 or whatever, and close it, run it. Oops, get rid of the rest of the stuff. And there you go, without having to construct anything. Alright, so this has been Steven from LegitPC, and this is talking about static variables and methods. So methods first, and then variables. This is a variable. This is a method, so this is a class variable, they call it, instead of an instance variable. If it was just this, it would be an instance variable. Alright, so this will help you with a lot of different things, and we'll go over it. We might go into it a little more later. It's not used super often, but it would be in here very, very useful. Anything that you don't want to create an object with, just make them static automatically. So something like this, or even the guessing game, I guess, if you want. The employee, don't do that because it's an object, and student's an object. So yeah, so just make them classes. So just make them static if you don't want to create an object out of it, and there's no parameters in here. So usually if there's no parameters in here, and there's no instance variables, automatically make it private if you don't want to save it. Make it static if you don't want to save anything. Alright, so this has been Steven from LegitTechTutorials, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Subscribe for more of these series and more of videos on this series. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.